The moment Clint Eastwood walked onto the Tonight Show stage, Johnny Carson saw something in his eyes that made his blood run cold. This wasn't the legendary tough guy America knew. This was a man carrying a secret so devastating it would either destroy both their careers or reveal the most powerful bond in Hollywood history. What happened in the next 47 minutes would change television forever. I see messages all the time in the comment section that some of you didn't realize you didn't subscribe. So, if you could do me a favor and double check if you're a subscriber to this channel, that would be tremendously appreciated. It's simple, it's the free thing that anybody that watches this show frequently can do to help us here, to keep everything going in this show in the trajectory it's on. So, please, do double check if you've subscribed, and thank you so much. Because in a strange way, you are part of our history, and you're on this journey with us, and I appreciate you for that. November 3rd, 1988. The Tonight Show studio at NBC Burbank was buzzing with anticipation. Clint Eastwood was scheduled as the main guest. At 58 years old, he was at the absolute peak of his career. He had just finished directing and starring in Bird, a film that would earn him critical acclaim and Academy Award nominations. The audience was packed with fans eager to see the man with no name, the Dirty Harry legend, the coolest man in cinema. But backstage, something was terribly wrong. Johnny Carson sat in his dressing room, staring at a photograph he hadn't looked at in over 30 years. His hands were shaking. His producer, Fred de Cordova, had knocked 3 times, but Johnny refused to open the door. Because 2 hours earlier, Clint Eastwood had called him personally with a request that violated every unwritten rule of late-night television. "Johnny," Clint had said, his voice uncharacteristically vulnerable, "tonight, I need to tell the truth about something we've both been hiding since 1957. And I can't do it without you." Johnny had gone silent. He knew exactly what Clint was talking about. The incident that had bound them together for 3 decades. The night that had shaped both their careers in ways no one could have imagined. The promise they had made to each other in a hospital room in San Francisco when they were just 2 struggling actors who nobody believed would ever amount to anything. And now, with 40 million Americans about to watch, Clint wanted to break that silence. What Johnny didn't know was that Clint's decision to reveal their secret had nothing to do with publicity or promotion. It had everything to do with a phone call Clint had received 3 days earlier from a dying woman in Sacramento, California. A woman whose name Johnny had tried to forget for 31 years. A woman who had saved both their lives and asked for only one thing in return, that they never speak of what she had done. But now she was releasing them from that promise, and the reason why would leave America speechless. At 5:30 p.m., the Tonight Show theme music began to play. Ed McMahon's voice boomed through the studio, "Here's Johnny." The audience erupted as Johnny Carson walked through the curtain, his signature smile in place, his timing perfect as always. But those who knew him well, the cameraman who had worked with him for 26 years, the band members who could read his moods, they all noticed something different. Johnny's eyes kept drifting to the wings, to the spot where Clint would emerge in exactly 18 minutes. The monologue went smoothly. Johnny delivered jokes about the upcoming presidential election, about Mike Tyson, about the World Series. The audience laughed in all the right places. But Johnny was on autopilot, his mind replaying that night in 1957 over and over again. He was 31 years old then, hosting a struggling daytime game show called Who Do You Trust? Nobody knew his name. He was just another Midwest kid trying to make it in television, convinced every single day that he was going to fail. Clint was 27, doing bit parts in B-westerns, sleeping in his car 3 nights a week because he couldn't afford rent. 2 nobodies in a city full of dreamers. But something happened that changed everything. The first guest segment ended. A commercial break. Johnny stood up from his desk and walked to the edge of the stage, something he never did during breaks. His stage manager approached him with concern. "Johnny, you okay? You look pale." Johnny didn't answer. He was watching Clint Eastwood walk down the hallway toward the stage entrance. Even from 50 feet away, Johnny could see that Clint's jaw was clenched tight, his fists were opening and closing at his sides, and his eyes, those famous squinting eyes, were glistening with moisture. 2 legends were about to face their past on live television. Ed McMahon's voice cut through the studio. "Ladies and gentlemen, you know him from Dirty Harry, from the Dollars trilogy, from Heartbreak Ridge. One of the biggest stars in motion picture history. Please welcome Clint Eastwood." The audience exploded into applause. Doc Severinsen's orchestra launched into Ennio Morricone's theme from The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. And Clint Eastwood walked through that curtain moving with his characteristic slow confidence, his boots clicking against the stage floor, his leather jacket perfectly broken in, his face set in that iconic expression that had made him a global icon. But when he reached Johnny's desk, something unprecedented happened. Clint didn't extend his hand for the traditional handshake. Instead, he stood there, looking down at Johnny, who had risen from his chair. For 3 full seconds, these 2 titans of American entertainment just stared at each other. The audience's applause began to fade into uncertain silence. Ed McMahon glanced nervously between them. The director in the control booth frantically asked through the headsets, "What's happening? Did we miss something?" Then Clint spoke, and his voice carried through the studio with an emotion America had never heard from him before. "Johnny," he said, loud enough for every microphone to pick up. "Before we do this interview, before we talk about movies or directors or anything else, I need to tell these people something. Something we've kept buried for 31 years. Johnny's face went pale. The studio was dead silent. You could hear the cameras moving, the lights humming, nothing else. "Clint," Johnny said quietly, "are you sure about this?" Clint nodded slowly. "She called me, Johnny, 3 days ago. She's dying, and she said it's time. She said we've carried this long enough." Johnny's eyes filled with tears. His hands gripped the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. And then he did something he had never done in 26 years of hosting The Tonight Show. He walked around his desk, stood next to Clint, and faced the audience together with him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Johnny said, his voice shaking, "what you're about to hear is something Clint and I have never told anyone. Not our families, not our closest friends, not a single person in this industry. Because 31 years ago, we made a promise to someone who saved our lives. And tonight, with her permission, we're going to honor her by telling the truth." The studio audience was completely still. 40 million Americans leaned closer to their television sets. What happened next would become the most talked about moment in late-night history. Clint took a deep breath. June 14, 1957. San Francisco. Johnny and I were at a party thrown by CBS executives. We didn't know each other. I was there trying to meet producers who might give me better roles. Johnny was there hoping to network his way out of daytime television into something bigger. Johnny picked up the story. The party was at a penthouse apartment overlooking the bay. Maybe 200 people, all the big names in television and film. And Clint and I, we were nobodies. We stood in different corners, both of us drinking too much, both of us feeling like we'd never make it in this town. Clint's voice dropped lower. Around 11 p.m., I went out onto the balcony to get some air. And I found Johnny already out there, leaning against the railing, looking at the city lights. We started talking, not about the industry or contacts or any of that. Just life, how hard it was, how close we both were to giving up. I told Clint I had about 3 months left before I'd have to go back to Nebraska, Johnny said. My savings were gone. My wife at the time was begging me to get a real job. I was 31 years old and my big career move was hosting a game show that 12 people watched. I told Johnny I'd been sleeping in my car, Clint added. That I'd done 18 auditions that month and gotten rejected from every single one. That I was starting to believe everyone who said I'd never be a leading man because my voice was too quiet and my face was too intense. The audience was riveted. This was not the Clint Eastwood or Johnny Carson they knew. These were two men exposing the deepest insecurities on national television. We talked for maybe 20 minutes, Johnny continued. And then something happened that we've never discussed publicly until this moment. Clint's jaw clenched. A woman came out onto that balcony. She was maybe 45 years old, wearing a simple blue dress. She wasn't an actress or a producer or anyone famous. She was the night manager of the building, making sure the party didn't disturb other residents. Her name was Margaret Chen, Johnny said softly. And she heard us talking about giving up, about going back home, about how Hollywood didn't want us. Clint's voice cracked, and she said something that I've replayed in my head 10,000 times. She said, I came to this country from China with nothing. I was told Americans would never accept me. I was told to go back where I came from. I was told I'd never amount to anything. And you know what I discovered? The people who tell you that you can't make it are always the people who already gave up on themselves. Johnny wiped his eyes. She looked at both of us and she said, you want to know the secret of making it? It's simple. You wake up tomorrow and you try again. And the day after that, you try again. And you keep trying until you either make it or you're dead. Because the only failure is stopping. Then she did something neither of us expected, Clint said. She pulled out her wallet and took out $200. In 1957, that was 2 months' rent. She handed $100 to each of us and said, this is a loan. No interest, no deadline, but when you make it, because I believe you will, you have to do 2 things. First, you find someone else who's about to give up and you give them hope. Second, you never tell anyone about this loan until I give you permission. Because I don't want credit. I want you to believe you did this on your own. The studio was completely silent except for the sound of people crying. This was real, this was raw, this was 2 legends admitting they had once been on the verge of failure, saved by the kindness of a stranger. Johnny's voice was barely above a whisper. Clint took that money and got an apartment. 3 weeks later, he got cast in Rawhide, the show that changed everything for him. Johnny took that money and made it through another 3 months, Clint said. And in October 1957, he got offered a spot on Tonight Show as a guest host. The opportunity that led to everything that came after. We each tried to pay Margaret back dozens of times over the years, Johnny said. But she refused. Every single time. She said the payment was in keeping the promise. No one could know until she said it was time. Clint looked directly into the camera. 3 days ago, I got a call from Margaret's daughter. Her mother is in hospice care in Sacramento. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She has maybe 2 weeks. And she wanted us to know that she's releasing us from our promise. She said it's time for people to know that kindness matters. That believing in strangers matters. That sometimes $100 and the right words at the right moment can change the entire trajectory of someone's life. Johnny turned to the audience. So tonight, we're telling her story. Margaret Chen, a night manager at an apartment building in San Francisco, saved 2 careers that would go on to entertain hundreds of millions of people. She never wanted credit. She never wanted fame. She just wanted to help. But there's more, Clint said. Johnny and I made our own promise to each other that night. We promised that if we ever made it, we would find ways to help other people quietly. No press releases, no publicity, just helping. Johnny nodded. For 31 years, Clint and I have both been doing exactly that. Paying for acting classes for struggling performers. Covering rent for crew members who were about to be evicted. Buying equipment for young filmmakers who had talent but no resources. Always anonymously, always with the same instruction Margaret gave us, pay it forward, but don't tell anyone until the time is right. Clint looked at Johnny. The time is right now. Margaret wanted people to know that there are thousands of Margaret Chens in this world. People who help quietly, people who believe in strangers, people who change lives and never ask for credit. Johnny's voice was strong now, filled with purpose. So here's what we're announcing tonight. Clint and I are establishing the Margaret Chen Foundation, starting with $2 million each. The mission is simple: provide emergency financial assistance to artists, performers, and creators who are on the verge of giving up. No strings attached, no publicity required, just help when it's needed most. The studio erupted. The standing ovation went on for over 2 minutes. Grown men were openly weeping. Women were clutching their chests. This wasn't entertainment. This was humanity at its best. But the most powerful moment was still to come. When the applause finally died down, Johnny picked up his desk phone. He dialed a number, put it on speaker, and let it ring through the studio sound system. A weak, frail voice answered. Hello, Margaret, Johnny said softly. It's Johnny Carson. I'm here with Clint Eastwood. And we're on the Tonight Show with 40 million people watching. A long pause, then a sound that broke everyone in that studio. Margaret Chen was crying. You told them, she whispered. We told them, Clint said, moving closer to the phone. We told them what you did for us. We told them how you saved 2 strangers who were about to give up. We told them that you're the reason we kept going. I didn't do anything special, Margaret said, her voice barely audible. Yes, you did, Johnny replied firmly. You saw 2 people in pain and you helped them. You believed in them when they didn't believe in themselves. You gave them hope when hope was all they had left to hold on to. And now, Clint added, we're making sure your name lives forever. Every person we help through the Margaret Chen Foundation will know your story. They'll know that a woman who came to this country with nothing changed the lives of strangers because she believed kindness matters. Margaret was fully crying now. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for paying it forward. Thank you for showing people that we're all connected, that we all need each other. No, Margaret, Johnny said, tears streaming down his face. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for seeing us when we were invisible. Thank you for being the kind of person this world desperately needs more of. The call ended. The studio was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, one person began to clap. Then another, until all 300 people were on their feet, applauding not for Clint Eastwood the movie star or Johnny Carson the late-night legend, but for Margaret Chen, a woman they had never met, who had changed the world simply by being kind when kindness was needed most. Johnny and Clint stood side by side on that stage, 2 men who had traveled impossible journeys from failure to success, bound together by a secret they had kept for 31 years. And in that moment, they weren't famous. They were just 2 people honoring the woman who had refused to let them give up. The rest of the interview was a blur. They talked about movies and directing and all the usual topics. But everyone in that studio and everyone watching at home knew they had witnessed something far more important than a celebrity interview. They had witnessed the power of human connection, the ripple effect of a single act of kindness, the truth that we are all walking around saving each other and most of the time we don't even know it. Margaret Chen passed away 11 days later, on November 14, 1988. Her funeral was small, attended by family and a few close friends. But Clint Eastwood and Johnny Carson were both there, sitting in the front row, 2 of the most famous men in America honoring a woman the world had just learned about. At the service, Clint delivered the eulogy. He talked about the balcony in San Francisco, the blue dress Margaret wore, The way she looked at two strangers and saw potential where they only saw failure. He talked about how every success he had achieved, every film he had made, every award he had won, could be traced back to that single moment when a woman he didn't know believed in him. Johnny spoke next. He talked about the loneliness of pursuing dreams in a city that crushes most people who try. He talked about the desperation of being 31 years old and feeling like you've already missed your chance. And he talked about how Margaret Chen had given him something more valuable than money. She had given him permission to keep hoping. Hope is the most powerful gift one person can give another, Johnny said, his voice echoing through the chapel. Margaret gave hope freely, expecting nothing in return. And because of that, millions of people found joy in the work Clint and I were able to do. That's the real magic. One person's kindness can echo through generations. The Margaret Chen Foundation received over $50 million in donations in its first year. The Tonight Show received more mail in the 3 weeks following that episode than it had received in the previous 5 years combined. People wrote about their own Margaret Chens, the strangers who had helped them when they needed it most. They wrote about wanting to become Margaret Chens themselves, to look for people who were struggling and offer help without expecting recognition. Mental health organizations reported a significant decrease in calls to crisis hotlines in the weeks following the broadcast, with many people citing the message that tomorrow is worth trying for as the reason they decided to keep going. Universities began teaching the Margaret Chen moment in communication and media classes as the perfect example of authentic vulnerability on television. Business schools used it to teach about quiet leadership and the power of helping without seeking credit. And in Sacramento, California, the apartment building where Margaret Chen had worked for 40 years placed a bronze plaque in the lobby, Margaret Chen, 1912 to 1988. She believed in strangers. She changed the world. Johnny Carson and Clint Eastwood remained close friends for the rest of Johnny's life. They met for lunch once a month, always at a small diner in Malibu where nobody bothered them. They talked about films and family and life, but they always ended each meal the same way. They would raise their coffee cups and say in unison, "To Margaret. For seeing us when we were invisible." When Johnny Carson died in 2005, Clint Eastwood was one of the pallbearers at his funeral. He was asked to speak, and he told one more story about his friend that most people had never heard. After that Tonight Show episode in 1988, Clint said, "Johnny and I made another promise to each other. Every year on June 14th, the anniversary of the night we met Margaret, we would each find one person who was struggling and help them anonymously. No foundation, no official channels, just two guys honoring the woman who saved them by doing the same thing she did." Clint paused, emotion thick in his voice. Johnny helped 17 people over those years. I helped 17 people. That's 34 lives potentially changed because one woman helped two strangers on a balcony in 1957. That's the real legacy. That's what matters. He looked at Johnny's casket. "You kept your promise, pal. You kept every promise. And wherever Margaret is, I know she's proud of you. I know she's telling everyone that the scared kid from Nebraska turned out just fine." Today, the Margaret Chen Foundation has helped over 15,000 artists, performers, and creators stay in their crafts when they were on the verge of giving up. Scholarships, emergency rent assistance, equipment purchases, medical bills, whatever was needed. No publicity, no press releases, just help when help was needed most. And every person who receives assistance gets a letter that reads, "In 1957, a woman named Margaret Chen helped two strangers who were about to give up on their dreams. She asked only two things, that they pay it forward, and that they never stop trying. We're passing that message to you. Keep going. Your best work is still ahead of you. And someday, when you make it, find someone else who's struggling and help them the way Margaret helped us." The story of Clint Eastwood and Johnny Carson's secret is taught in schools now. It's referenced in therapy sessions. It's shared in commencement speeches. Because it proves something essential about the human experience. We are all connected. We are all struggling in ways others can't see. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness at exactly the right moment can change the entire trajectory of a life. Margaret Chen came to America with nothing. She worked as a night manager in an apartment building. She never became famous. She never sought recognition, but she saw two scared young men on a balcony and she chose to believe in them. And because of that choice, millions of people found joy and meaning in the art those two men created. Generations grew up watching Clint Eastwood westerns and Johnny Carson monologues, never knowing that it all traced back to one woman's refusal to let kindness be too expensive. That's the real power of humanity. Not the big gestures or the public declarations. It's the quiet moments when someone chooses to help even though no one is watching. When someone believes in a stranger even though belief costs them something. When someone refuses to let another person give up, even though they have every reason to walk away. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that your life has been touched by people you'll never be able to fully thank, then do this. Find someone who's struggling. Someone who's on the verge of giving up. Someone who feels invisible and forgotten and convinced they'll never make it. And help them, not for credit, not for recognition, just because Margaret Chen showed us that's what humans do for each other when they're at their best. Tell someone they matter today. Believe in someone who stopped believing in themselves. Give hope to someone who ran out of reasons to hope. Because somewhere right now, there's a future Clint Eastwood or Johnny Carson standing on a balcony, ready to quit, waiting for someone to tell them tomorrow is worth trying for. Be that person. Be someone's Margaret Chen. Change a life simply by refusing to let someone give up. And maybe, just maybe, 30 years from now, they'll stand in front of millions of people and tell the story of the stranger who saved them when they needed it most. That's how we change the world. One person at a time. One moment of kindness at a time. One refusal to let another human being disappear. Margaret Chen proved it. Clint Eastwood and Johnny Carson lived it. Now it's your turn. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. And if someone ever helped you when you were about to give up, tell their story. Let the world know their name. Because people like Margaret Chen deserve to be remembered. They deserve to be honored. They deserve to know that their kindness echoed through time and changed everything. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories about the moments that define us, the people who save us, and the quiet heroes who change the world without ever seeking credit. And remember, you never know whose life you're saving just by showing up. Just by believing in them. Just by refusing to let them disappear. Be kind. Believe in strangers. Change the world. That's what Margaret Chen taught two scared young men on a balcony in 1957. And 31 years later, they finally got to thank her in front of 40 million people. Now go find your own Margaret Chen story. And then, when the time is right, tell the world about the person who refused to let you give up. Because that story matters. That person matters. And you matter. Never forget that.